The mahogany table gleamed under the lawyer's office lights, and I watched my sister Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers drum against its surface as she waited for the will reading to conclude. She'd already heard what she wanted: the house, the investments, the family jewelry, everything. I sat in the corner chair, the one with the slightly worn armrest, holding a cardboard box filled with yellowed envelopes. That was my inheritance. A box of old letters that smelled like mothballs and forgotten promises. "Well, that concludes the reading of Eleanor Whitmore's last will and testament," Mr. Harrison said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Victoria was already standing, her designer heels clicking against the floor as she moved toward the door. She paused beside my chair, and I could smell her expensive perfume. Something French, something that cost more than I made in a week at the bookstore. "I suppose those old letters are fitting," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Mother always said you were the sentimental one. Too emotional for business, too soft for the real world." She glanced at the box in my lap. "Maybe you can make a scrapbook or something. Frame them. Hang them in that little apartment of yours." I didn't respond. I'd learned long ago that silence was safer than words when it came to Victoria. She swept out of the room, already on her phone, probably calling her husband Richard to share the good news about their newfound wealth. Mr. Harrison gave me a pitying look as he gathered his papers. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said quietly. "I know this must be difficult." Difficult, that was one word for it. 23 years old, and I just watched my last hope of financial stability walk out the door in Louboutin heels. But what hurt more than the money was the message behind it. Even in death, the woman I'd called mother for 23 years had made it clear. Victoria was the real daughter, the chosen one, the heir. I was just... What? The charity case they'd kept around out of obligation? If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the forgotten one, the afterthought in your own family, I need you to stay with me. Because what I found in that box of old letters changed everything. Not just my bank account, but my entire understanding of who I am. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to know that sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as worthless junk. And trust me, you'll want to hear what happened when I opened the first envelope. I am Emma Whitmore, or at least that's who I thought I was. Growing up in the Whitmore household meant understanding your place from day one. Victoria was older by 2 years, and those 2 years might as well have been 2 decades in terms of how differently we were treated. She was the golden child with the golden hair, the one whose report cards earned spots on the refrigerator, whose piano recitals filled the living room with guests, whose accomplishments were chronicled in a thick leather album that sat prominently on the coffee table. My album, if you could call it that, was a manila folder stuffed in the back of Mother's filing cabinet. I know because I found it once when I was 12, looking for my birth certificate for a school trip. Inside were the bare minimum documents: adoption papers dated when I was 3 months old, medical records, a single baby photo where my dark hair stood in stark contrast to the blonde family I'd been placed with. "You should be grateful," Mother, Eleanor, would say whenever I asked why Victoria got private tutors while I was told to make do with public school resources. "We took you in when no one else wanted you. We gave you a home, a family name. Some children don't even get that." The reminder was constant, woven into every interaction like a thread I could never pull loose. When Victoria got a car for her 16th birthday, a white BMW that sparkled in the driveway, I got a bus pass and a lecture about not expecting handouts. When she went to Yale, fully funded by the family trust, I was told that community college would build character and that student loans would teach me responsibility. "It's different for Victoria," Eleanor would explain, not even bothering to lower her voice when I was in earshot. "She's a Whitmore by blood. She has obligations, expectations to meet. You're free to be whatever you want to be." Free. That's what she called it when I worked 3 jobs to pay for my state school education. Free was waiting tables until 2 a.m. and then getting up at 6 to open the campus coffee shop before my 8 a.m. classes. Free was watching Victoria post photos from her spring break in Cabo, while I spent mine doing inventory at the bookstore where I worked. But the cruelest moments weren't the big ones. They were the small, daily cuts that bled slowly over years. The way Eleanor would introduce us at parties. "This is my daughter Victoria. She's at Yale studying law. And this is Emma. She lives with us." Not my other daughter, not even my adopted daughter. Just Emma, the girl who lived with them, like I was a long-term house guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Family dinners were performances in subtle cruelty. Richard, Victoria's husband, would talk about his latest promotion at the investment firm, and Eleanor would beam with pride. Victoria would mention her latest shopping trip to Paris, and father, when he was still alive, would chuckle indulgently. When I mentioned making the dean's list at my state school, the table would fall silent for a moment before Eleanor would say something like, "That's nice, dear. Victoria, tell us more about the charity gala you're organizing." The Christmas I turned 21, I made the mistake of hoping things might be different. I'd just graduated, summa cum laude, with a degree in literature. I'd even landed a job at a publishing house, entry level, but it was a start. I wrapped my diploma in silver paper and placed it under the tree, thinking maybe this would be the moment Eleanor finally saw me as worthy of the Whitmore name. Christmas morning came, and Victoria received a pair of diamond earrings that caught the light like captured stars. Richard got a Rolex. Eleanor gave generous checks to Victoria's husband's family members who'd joined us. And me? I got a gift card to Target and a reminder that my student loan payments would start soon. "You should be saving," Eleanor said, as if the $50 gift card was a lesson in financial responsibility rather than what it really was. A reminder that I wasn't worth the real gifts, the family heirlooms, the things that mattered. But there was one person who saw me differently, and that was Grandmother Rose. She wasn't really my grandmother. She was Eleanor's mother, but she insisted I call her that. She was the only one who ever did. "Blood doesn't make family," she'd tell me when she'd find me crying in the garden after another family slight. "The heart does, and you, my dear Emma, have more heart than all of them combined." Grandmother Rose would sneak me books from her personal library, first editions that Eleanor would have had a fit about if she'd known. She taught me to appreciate poetry, to find solace in words when the world felt too cruel. When she was dying 2 years ago, she held my hand, not Victoria's, and whispered, "The truth always finds a way, sweetheart. Remember that." I thought she was delirious from the medication. Now I wonder if she knew something I didn't. The isolation wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Victoria made sure I knew my place in every possible way. When her friends came over, I was encouraged to find something to do outside the house. When the family took their annual vacation to the Hamptons, there was always a reason I couldn't come. Someone needed to watch the house, or they'd forgotten to book my ticket, or Victoria needed the extra room for her extensive wardrobe. I remember my high school graduation. I'd been valedictorian, something I'd worked myself to exhaustion to achieve, thinking maybe academic excellence would finally earn me a place at the family table. I stood at that podium, looking out at the crowd, and saw the empty seats where my family should have been. They were at Victoria's college reunion that weekend. It was already planned, Eleanor had said, as if my graduation date hadn't been set for months. Mrs. Chen from next door ended up being the only one who came. She brought me flowers, yellow roses, and took pictures with her ancient camera. "You should be so proud," she said, tears in her eyes. "Your parents don't know what they're missing." But they did know. That was the worst part. They knew exactly what they were doing. The day Father died, William Whitmore, the man whose name I carried but whose affection I never earned, I wasn't even called to the hospital. Victoria told me later, casual as anything, that he'd passed peacefully with family around him. Family. The word was a weapon she wielded with precision. "He mentioned you at the end," she said, and for a moment my heart lifted. "He wanted to make sure you knew the rent for your apartment was paid through the end of the month. After that, you're on your own." Even dying, his last thought about me was transactional. A final reminder that I was a temporary obligation, a debt to be settled. The apartment they'd generously provided was above the garage of one of their rental properties. 600 square feet of drafty windows and temperamental plumbing. Victoria lived in a penthouse that Richard bought her in the city, but I was supposed to be grateful for my garage apartment, grateful for the scraps, grateful to be allowed to exist in their orbit at all. I threw myself into my work at the bookstore after the publishing house job fell through, another casualty of budget cuts that somehow only affected the employees without connections. The bookstore was small, dusty, and perfect. Between the stacks, I could pretend I belonged somewhere. The regular customers knew my name, asked about my day, treated me like I mattered. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then Eleanor got sick. Cancer, aggressive and unforgiving. For 6 months I watched her fade, and despite everything, I was there every day. Victoria would sweep in for an hour, usually with photographers from the society pages to document her devotion to her ailing mother. But I was the one who held Eleanor's hand through chemo, who read to her when she couldn't sleep, who cleaned up when she was too proud to let the nurses see her vulnerable. "Why?" she asked me once, in a moment of clarity between morphine doses. "Why do you stay?" "Because that's what family does," I told her. She turned her face away, but I saw the tear slide down her cheek. It was the only time I ever saw Eleanor Whitmore cry. The night she died, she was restless, mumbling about boxes and letters and things that needed to be said. Victoria dismissed it as delirium, but Eleanor kept reaching for my hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. "The letters," she whispered. "Emma, the letters will explain." "What letters?" I asked, but she was already slipping away. Her last words to Victoria were about the estate, making sure she knew where all the account numbers were kept. Her last words to me were about letters that no one else seemed to know existed. The funeral was a society event. Eleanor Whitmore's death made the local papers. Philanthropist and society matron leaves behind legacy of charity. The charity, of course, didn't extend to me. I sat in the third row at the service, behind Victoria's husband's family, while Victoria played the grieving daughter to perfection. She even managed to cry on cue when the cameras were nearby. After the service, as everyone gathered at the house for the reception, I overheard Victoria talking to her friends in the parlor. "It's such a relief, honestly," she was saying. "Mother held on to things for far too long. Some decisions should have been made years ago." She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Like Emma. Mother's little charity project. I suppose we'll have to figure out what to do with her now." "Surely she doesn't expect to inherit anything," one of her friends asked. Victoria laughed, bright and cruel. "Oh, Mother took care of that. She left her something appropriately sentimental. Some old letters or something. Nothing of value, of course. We couldn't have the help getting ideas above their station." The help. After 23 years, that's what I was to her. The help. I left the reception early, walking the 3 miles back to my apartment in my funeral dress and uncomfortable shoes. With each step, I wondered why I'd spent so many years trying to earn love from people who were determined not to give it. Maybe it was the human need to belong, to be claimed by someone, to matter. Or maybe it was just hope. Stupid, stubborn hope that one day I'd do something, be something enough to make them see me as family. The call from Mr. Harrison's office came 3 days later. The will reading. I almost didn't go. What was the point? But something. Maybe Grandmother Rose's voice in my head, maybe Eleanor's last words about letters, made me put on my only decent dress and take the bus downtown. And now here I was, sitting in my cold apartment above the garage, holding a box of old letters while Victoria was probably already planning how to spend her millions. The box was unremarkable. Cardboard, slightly water-stained, held closed with twine that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Inside, I could see dozens of envelopes, some yellow with age, others still relatively white. The writing on them varied. some in Eleanor's precise script, others in handwriting I didn't recognize. I pulled out the first letter, dated just a month before my adoption. It was addressed to Eleanor, but the return address made me pause. Blackwood Industries, New York. Why would Eleanor be getting letters from Blackwood Industries? They were one of the biggest corporations in the country, owned by the notoriously private Blackwood family. I opened the envelope carefully, the old paper crackling under my fingers. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery, and as I read the first line, my hands started to shake. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, as per our agreement, the child will be placed with you within the month. The sum of $500,000 has been transferred to the account specified. Please remember that absolute discretion is required. The child must never know her true parentage. If she were to discover that she is my daughter, the consequences would be catastrophic for all involved. It was signed, Catherine Blackwood. Catherine Blackwood. The Catherine Blackwood. The woman who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd been on the cover of Forbes more times than anyone could count, who died in a car accident when I was 5 years old. The woman who, apparently, was my mother. I sat back, the letter trembling in my hands. This had to be a mistake, some kind of joke. But as I pulled out more letters, the story began to unfold like a terrible, beautiful puzzle. Catherine Blackwood had been 23 when she had me, the same age I was now. Unmarried, at the helm of a growing empire, in the middle of a hostile takeover that would define her career. A baby would have been a scandal, a weakness her enemies could exploit. So she'd done what she thought was best. She'd hidden me away with a family who needed money and wouldn't ask questions. The letters chronicled everything. Monthly updates Eleanor had been required to send about my progress. Catherine's responses, always formal, but with hints of something deeper. Thank you for the photo. She has my mother's eyes. Or, I'm glad to hear she's doing well in school. Intelligence runs in the family. But it was the last letter that broke me. Dated just a week before Catherine's death, it was different from the others. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. Eleanor, I can't do this anymore. I'm coming for her. I don't care about the scandal or the company or any of it. She's my daughter, and she deserves to know the truth. I've already had my lawyers draw up the papers. Emma will be acknowledged as my heir, and nothing, not the board, not the press, not anyone, will stop me from claiming my child. I'll be there on Sunday. Please have her ready. Tell her that her mother loves her and is finally coming home. Sunday. She died on a Saturday. The box contained more than just letters. There were documents, DNA tests that Eleanor had clearly hidden, confirming my parentage. Bank statements showing monthly payments from Catherine to the Whitmores that went far beyond the initial $500,000. They'd been paid to keep me, paid to hide me, paid to make me feel worthless while they lived off my mother's money. There was also a sealed envelope with my name on it in Catherine's handwriting. Inside was a single key and a business card for a lawyer in New York. Not just any lawyer, but David Sterling, the man who'd been Catherine Blackwood's personal attorney and was now the head counsel for Blackwood Industries. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. It was past business hours, but something made me try anyway. The phone rang once, twice, and then a deep voice answered. Ms. Whitmore, he said before I could speak, I've been waiting for your call for 18 years. You know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Ms. Blackwood. Your mother made provisions for you before her death. Provisions that were to be activated when you turned 21 or upon Eleanor Whitmore's death, whichever came later. I believe you have a key? Yes, but that key opens a safety deposit box at the Manhattan Trust Bank. Inside, you'll find everything you need to claim your inheritance, your real inheritance. Not the scraps the Whitmores threw you, but what Catherine left for you, what you've always been entitled to. I don't understand. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did I have to find out this way? There was a pause. Your mother's death was sudden. The Whitmores were supposed to tell you the truth when you turned 18, but they clearly chose to violate that agreement. They've been living off your trust fund for years, Ms. Blackwood. The payments that were supposed to stop when you came of age never did because they never told you who you really were. The room spun. Every luxury Victoria had enjoyed, every vacation I'd been excluded from, every opportunity I'd been denied, all of it had been paid for with money meant for me. My mother's money. My money. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You come to New York. Tomorrow, if possible. There are people here who have been waiting to meet you. Your mother's sister, for one. She never believed the story about you dying in infancy. She's been searching for you for years. People think I'm dead?" The Whitmores told everyone you died shortly after Catherine gave you up. They've been collecting money from a trust set up for a child they claimed no longer existed. Ms. Blackwood, I don't think you understand the full scope of what's been done to you, or what you're about to inherit. I hung up the phone and sat in the darkness of my apartment, the letters scattered around me like pieces of a life I'd never known I'd lost. Outside, I could see the main house lit up, Victoria's BMW in the driveway. They were probably celebrating right now, toasting to their good fortune, never knowing that their carefully constructed lie was about to come crashing down. The next morning, I took the earliest train to New York. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Victoria had sent me a text asking when I'd be clearing out of the apartment, generous enough to give me at least a month to find somewhere else to live. I didn't respond. The Manhattan Trust Bank was all marble and mahogany, the kind of place where they didn't just handle money, but legacy. The safety deposit box was in the deepest vault, and the manager himself escorted me down, his face grave. "We've been maintaining this box for 18 years, he said. "Your mother's instructions were very specific. No one but you could access it." The key turned smoothly, despite its age. Inside the box were stacks of documents, photographs, and a letter with my name written in Catherine's elegant script. I opened it with trembling fingers. "My darling Emma, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and I didn't make it to you in time. I want you to know that giving you up was the biggest mistake of my life. Not a day has passed that I haven't thought of you, haven't planned for the moment I could bring you home. The Whitmores were supposed to be temporary, just until I could stabilize the company and weather the scandal. But I was a coward, and I waited too long. By now you've probably been told you're worthless, that you're nobody, that you should be grateful for scraps. It was part of the agreement. They were supposed to keep you humble, to make sure you didn't draw attention. I'm so sorry, my darling. It was cruel, and it was wrong, and if I could take it back, I would. But you are not nobody. You are my daughter, my heir, and everything I built was for you. The documents in this box prove your parentage and establish your claim to my estate. Not just money, Emma, but a seat on the board of Blackwood Industries. The company I built from nothing is yours by birthright. Your Aunt Margaret has been fighting the board for years, trying to keep my vision alive. She doesn't know about you. I was too ashamed to tell her what I'd done. But she will welcome you with open arms. She's a force of nature, just like your grandmother was, just like you will be. The Whitmores will try to stop you. They've built their entire lives on the lie of your non-existence, but you have something they don't, the truth. And the truth, my darling, is more powerful than all their lies combined. Be brave, my daughter. Be brilliant. Be everything they told you you couldn't be, and know that somewhere, somehow, your mother loves you and is so very proud of who you've become. All my love, Catherine." Beneath the letter were the documents David Sterling had mentioned. My original birth certificate with Catherine Blackwood listed as my mother. DNA test results. Financial statements showing a trust fund worth, I had to read the number 3 times, $800 million. Stock certificates for Blackwood Industries, deeds to properties in New York, London, and Paris, and photographs, dozens of photographs of Catherine holding me as a baby, her face radiant with love. There was also a folder marked Whitmore Agreement, and what I found inside made my blood run cold. Not only had they been paid to take me, but they'd been explicitly instructed to treat me as secondary to any biological children to maintain the illusion of charity adoption. They'd been paid extra to make me feel worthless. There were receipts, actual receipts, for their cruelty. David Sterling was waiting for me when I emerged from the bank, his face kind but serious. "I take it you found everything?" I could only nod, still clutching the folder of documents. "Your aunt is waiting at the Blackwood Industries headquarters. She's been hoping for a miracle for 18 years. You're it." The Blackwood building was a 60-story testament to ambition, its black glass facade reflecting the city like a mirror. The receptionist took one look at David Sterling and immediately escorted us to the private elevator. We rode in silence to the top floor, where the executive offices were located. Margaret Blackwood was standing at the window when we entered, her back to us. She was tall, elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. When she turned, I gasped. It was like looking at an older version of myself. The same dark eyes, the same sharp cheekbones, the same stubborn chin. "My God," she whispered. "You look just like her." And then she was across the room, pulling me into an embrace that felt like coming home. She smelled like expensive perfume and coffee, and her arms were strong around me. "We thought you were dead," she said into my hair. "They told us you died. Catherine was devastated. She was never the same after losing you." "She didn't lose me," I said, pulling back. "She gave me away." Margaret's face hardened. She was 23. Alone, and fighting off a hostile takeover from men who would have used any weakness to destroy her. "She thought she was protecting you. By the time she realized her mistake, it was too late. The car accident." "Was it really an accident?" Margaret and David exchanged glances. "We've never been able to prove otherwise," David said carefully. "But the timing was suspicious. She just informed the board of her intention to step back from the company to focus on personal matters. She'd hired investigators to look into getting you back. And then she died," I finished. "The Whitmores," Margaret said, her voice like ice. "They knew exactly what they were doing. Eleanor worked for Blackwood Industries briefly in her youth. That's how Catherine knew her. She seemed trustworthy, stable, the perfect temporary solution. But they got greedy. They've been stealing from the trust for years," David added. "Every payment that was supposed to stop when you turned 18 continued because they never revealed your identity. That's fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. We have enough to put them away for a very long time." I thought about Victoria in her penthouse, Eleanor's jewelry glittering on her fingers. I thought about every birthday they'd forgotten, every achievement they'd dismissed, every moment they'd made me feel like nothing. "I want to handle this myself first," I said. "Before lawyers and courts. I want them to know that I know." Margaret smiled, and it was sharp as a blade. "You really are Catherine's daughter. She would have done the same thing. It took 3 days to prepare everything. David helped me understand the full scope of my inheritance. Not just the money, but the power. I own 35% of Blackwood Industries, making me the largest single shareholder. I had a seat on the board that had been held in trust, waiting for Catherine's heir. I had properties, investments, and a network of allies who'd been loyal to my mother and were ready to transfer that loyalty to me. But more than that, I had the truth. I scheduled the confrontation for Sunday dinner. It was a Whitmore tradition. Formal, elaborate, with Victoria always holding court at the head of the table now that Eleanor was gone. I still had my key to the main house, though I suspected not for much longer. I arrived early, while they were still getting ready. The house felt different now that I knew the truth. Every expensive painting, every piece of furniture, every luxury item, all of it bought with blood money. My blood. My money. I went to Eleanor's study, where she'd kept all her important documents. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for, the real will. Not the one Mr. Harrison had read, but the one Eleanor had written years ago, before she knew I would discover the truth. In it, she'd left everything to me, calling me her beloved daughter and expressing regret for circumstances beyond her control. Victoria had clearly found it and hidden it, replacing it with a forgery that cut me out entirely. Another crime to add to the list. I heard voices in the dining room and made my way there. Victoria was already seated, Richard beside her, and several of their society friends arrayed around the table. They were laughing about something, champagne already flowing. "Emma," Victoria's voice was sharp with surprise and annoyance. "What are you doing here? This is a private dinner party." "Family dinner," I corrected, taking my usual seat at the far end of the table. "And I'm family, or have you forgotten?" She laughed, that bright, cruel sound I'd heard so many times. "Barely, and not for much longer. I've been meaning to tell you, we need the apartment back. You have 2 weeks to vacate." "Which apartment?" I asked mildly. "The one above the garage? Or the penthouse on 5th Avenue that's actually in my name?" The laughter stopped. "What are you talking about?" Richard asked, his voice uncertain. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table, David Sterling's number already dialed. "Mr. Sterling, are you ready?" "Whenever you are, Ms. Blackwood," his voice came through the speaker. "Ms. Blackwood?" Victoria's face had gone pale. "Emma, what kind of joke is this?" "No joke," I said, pulling out the folder of documents. "Just the truth about who I really am and what you and your mother have been doing for the past 23 years. I spread the papers on the table, the birth certificate, the DNA results, the bank statements showing the stolen trust fund payments. Victoria's hands shook as she picked up one of the documents. "This is impossible," she whispered. "You're nobody. You're the charity case. Mother said—" "Your mother lied," I said simply. "She was paid to lie, paid to take me, paid to hide me, paid to make me feel worthless while she stole from my trust fund. Every luxury you've ever enjoyed, Victoria. Every trip, every car, every piece of jewelry, paid for with my money." "You're lying!" She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is some kind of con. You've forged these documents. The FBI doesn't think they're forged." David's voice came through the phone. "They've been quite interested in the Whitmore family's financial records. 18 years of fraud adds up to serious federal charges." Richard was backing away from the table, his face ashen. "Victoria, what is she talking about? What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Victoria shrieked. "It was Mother. It was all Mother's idea." "But you knew," I said quietly. "You've known for years. I found the real will, Victoria. The one where Eleanor left everything to me. The one you destroyed and replaced with a forgery." The room erupted. Victoria's friends were demanding explanations. Richard was shouting about lawyers. Victoria was crying, ugly, genuine tears that ruined her perfect makeup. But I just sat there, calm for the first time in my life, because I finally understood something. They'd never had power over me. I'd given it to them, believing their lies, accepting their version of who I was. But I wasn't their charity case. I wasn't their obligation. I wasn't nobody. I was Emma Blackwood, and I was finally going home. "The house is mine," I said, cutting through the chaos. "The accounts are frozen. Your penthouse, your cars, your entire lifestyle, all of it was bought with stolen money. My money. And now, I'm taking it back." "You can't do this." Victoria lunged across the table, but Richard held her back. "We're family. We raised you." "You were paid to raise me," I corrected, "and you were paid extra to treat me badly. I have the receipts, Victoria, literal receipts for cruelty." I stood up, gathering my documents. "Mr. Sterling, please proceed with the eviction notices and the criminal charges." "With pleasure, Ms. Blackwood." I walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Victoria? That box of letters you thought was worthless? It contained correspondence from my mother, Catherine Blackwood, including her plans to claim me before she died. The lawyers are particularly interested in the timing of her accident, given that your mother worked for Blackwood Industries and would have known about those plans. Victoria's face went from pale to gray. You're suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything, I said. I'm just saying the FBI is very thorough when it comes to financial crimes that might be connected to other crimes. Have a lovely evening. I walked out of the house I'd never really belonged in, past the portraits of Whitmores who'd never been my family, and into the cool evening air. A car was waiting. Margaret had insisted on sending her driver. As we pulled away, I saw the police cars arriving, their lights painting the perfect suburban street in shades of blue and red. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Welcome home, darling. Your mother would be so proud." The aftermath was swift and brutal. The scandal made headlines for weeks. Society family exposed in decades-long fraud. The charity case who was actually an heiress. Blackwood billions. The hidden daughter returns. Victoria and Richard's divorce was messy and public. She lost everything. The house, the cars, the jewels, the status she'd built on a foundation of lies. The criminal charges were extensive. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, forgery. Victoria got 7 years. She'd been more involved than even I had realized, actively managing the theft of my trust fund since she turned 21. The FBI also reopened the investigation into Catherine's death, though nothing conclusive was ever proven. But I didn't follow the trials closely. I had a company to learn, a legacy to understand. Margaret became my mentor, teaching me everything Catherine would have taught me if she'd had the chance. I moved into Catherine's apartment in New York, a penthouse that made Victoria's look like a closet. I found my mother's things still there, preserved by Margaret like a shrine. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her perfume still sat on the vanity. And in her desk drawer, hundreds of photos of me as a baby, each one labeled with dates and little notes. Emma's first smile. Emma laughing. My beautiful daughter. I kept the bookstore job for a while, even though I didn't need it. The owner, Mr. Patel, nearly fainted when he found out who I really was. But he still treated me the same. Just Emma, the girl who loved books and made excellent coffee. It was grounding, necessary, a reminder of who I'd been and who I still was beneath the Blackwood name. 6 months after that dinner, I stood in the boardroom of Blackwood Industries for the first time, taking my mother's seat at the table. The board members who'd once tried to destroy her company to get to her secrets now had to answer to her daughter. Some of them looked at me with fear, others with calculation, a few with genuine respect. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice steady, "I know you weren't expecting me. Most of you thought I was dead. But I'm here now, and I have my mother's shares, my mother's vision, and my mother's determination. You can work with me, or you can work against me. But know this, I survived 23 years of being told I was nothing. I survived the Whitmores. I survived losing a mother I never got to know. Your corporate games, they're nothing compared to what I've already overcome." Old Mr. Chen, who'd been on the board since my mother's time, actually smiled. "You sound just like her," he said. "Catherine would be proud." The bookstore became my first project as a Blackwood. I bought the building, renovated it, turned it into a combination bookstore and community literacy center. Mr. Patel still runs it, but now with a full staff and programs for kids who, like me, find refuge in books when the world feels too cruel. Victoria wrote me a letter from prison. A real letter, handwritten, the way people used to communicate when things mattered. She apologized, not the fake apologies she'd given in court to try to reduce her sentence, but something that felt real. She said she'd always known deep down that I was different, that I had something she didn't. She'd thought it was resilience, or stupidity, or maybe just the freedom of low expectations. She hadn't realized it was royal blood, as she put it. The irony that I'd been the true heiress all along while she'd played pretend with my money, it was eating her alive. I didn't write back. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. But I did visit Eleanor's grave. I stood there for a long time, thinking about the woman who'd raised me to feel worthless while living off my inheritance, the woman who'd held my mother's secret and my future hostage for money, but also the woman who'd cried that single tear when I told her that family stays, even when it's hard. "I forgive you," I told the headstone. "Not for you, but for me. Because holding on to anger at a dead woman is just another kind of prison, and I've been freed from enough of those." Grandmother Rose's grave was right beside Eleanor's. I left yellow roses there, the same kind Mrs. Chen had brought to my graduation. "You knew, didn't you?" I whispered. "You tried to tell me in your own way. The truth always finds a way. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." A year later, I met someone. His name was James, and he was a prosecutor who'd worked on the Whitmore case. He didn't care about the Blackwood money or the scandal or any of it. He cared that I laughed at his terrible jokes, that I still got excited about first edition books, that I brought him coffee exactly the way he liked it, because I'd learned to pay attention to people's preferences when I was trying so hard to matter to someone. "You know what I love about you?" he said one evening, as we sat in my apartment, looking out at the city lights. "My billions of dollars?" I teased. "No," he said seriously. "I love that you survived becoming nobody and then becoming somebody, and you're still kind. Most people would have come out of what you went through bitter and cruel, but you're not. You're just you." We got married 2 years later, in a small ceremony with Margaret, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, Mr. Patel, and a handful of real friends. Not the society crowd Victoria had courted, but people who'd known me when I was nobody and loved me anyway. Victoria got out on parole after 5 years for good behavior. She works at a grocery store now, lives in a small apartment on the wrong side of town. I heard from someone that she's actually good at it, that she's humble now in a way she never was before. Sometimes I wonder if losing everything was the best thing that could have happened to her. Sometimes I wonder if we could have been real sisters if things had been different. But then I remember 23 years of calculated cruelty, and I let that wonder go. I have children now, twins, a boy and a girl. They'll grow up knowing exactly who they are, where they come from, what they're worth. Not in dollars, though there's plenty of that, but in love, in truth, in belonging. They'll never wonder if they matter. They'll never beg for scraps of affection. They'll never feel like charity cases in their own home. I named my daughter Catherine after the mother I never got to know, but who loved me enough to leave me the truth. I named my son William, not after the man who ignored me, but after my husband's father, who welcomed me into his family without question or condition. Sometimes I still dream about that girl in the corner chair, holding a box of old letters while her sister takes everything. I want to tell her to open them right away, to not wait, to not waste another moment believing she's worthless. But then I realize she needed to be that girl first. She needed to know what it was like to be nobody, so that when she became somebody, she'd never forget what really matters. The Blackwood fortune is worth over $1 billion now. The company has expanded into new markets, new technologies, new possibilities. I sit in boardrooms with the most powerful people in the world, and they listen when I speak. But the most valuable thing I own isn't stocks or properties or bank accounts. It's a yellowed letter from a mother who loved me enough to write the truth, even when she couldn't speak it. It's framed now, hanging in my office where I can see it every day. A reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as worthless things. That sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you were to find out who you really are. The Whitmores taught me to be grateful for scraps. They taught me I was nobody, that I should be thankful for their charity, that I would never be more than the girl who lived above the garage. They were wrong about everything except one thing. I am grateful. Grateful that their cruelty made me strong. Grateful that their lies led me to the truth. Grateful that in trying to keep me down, they gave me the strength to rise. Because here's what I learned from that box of old letters. Your worth isn't determined by the family that raises you, or the name you carry, or the money in your bank account. It's not about being chosen, or being blood, or being anything other than exactly who you are. The Whitmores tried to convince me I was worthless because they knew deep down that I was worth everything. They tried to dim my light because they were afraid of how bright I could shine. And now I shine, not with diamonds or designer clothes or society connections, but with the knowledge that I survived. I survived being abandoned by one mother and abused by another. I survived being told I was nothing while my inheritance was stolen. I survived the discovery that my entire life was built on lies. And I didn't just survive, I thrived. The bookstore is still my favorite place in the city. Sometimes I work a shift, just for old time's sake. Kids from the neighborhood come in for the reading programs, and I tell them stories. Not about princesses in towers, but about ordinary girls who discover they're extraordinary. About ugly ducklings who were always swans. About finding truth in unexpected places and strength in the darkest moments. "Miss Emma," one little girl asked me once, "were you ever sad?" "All the time," I told her honestly. "But being sad doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. And humans are capable of incredible things." She thought about that for a moment, then asked, "Even when everyone says you're nobody?" "Especially then," I said. "Because when you're nobody, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. When you're nobody, you can become anybody. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you discover you were somebody all along. You just needed to find the right letters to tell you so." Margaret is getting older now, but she's still fierce, still fighting for my mother's vision. She tells me stories about Catherine when she was young, brilliant, determined, fearless. She tells me I'm just like her, and for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I'm supposed to be like. The apartment above the garage was demolished last year. I had the whole property rebuilt as affordable housing for young people aging out of foster care. Kids who, like me, need a place to figure out who they are when the world keeps telling them they're nobody. Each apartment has a small library, and each library has a copy of the same book, a collection of letters between mothers and daughters, about love and loss and finding your way home. Victoria sent another letter last week. She's getting married, she said, to someone who knows her whole story and loves her anyway. She wanted me to know she's happy, really happy, for the first time in her life. She said losing everything had taught her what actually mattered. She said she finally understood why I'd always seemed so content with so little. Because I'd had something she'd never had. Not the Blackwood billions, which came later, but the ability to find worth in myself rather than in what I owned. I wrote back this time, just once. I told her I was glad she'd found happiness, that everyone deserves a second chance, that I hoped her new life would be built on truth rather than lies. I didn't forgive her. Some wounds run too deep for words to heal, but I released her. From my anger, from my story, from the weight of what she'd done. She was no longer my sister, no longer my enemy, just someone I'd known once in a different life. The truth about family, I've learned, is that it's not about blood or adoption papers or whose name you carry. It's about who shows up, who stays, who sees you when you're invisible to everyone else. Mrs. Chen, who came to my graduation when my own family wouldn't. Mr. Patel, who gave me a job and a purpose when I had nothing else. Margaret, who pulled me into her arms and called me home. James, who loved me when I was still learning to love myself. These are my family, chosen and cherished. But Catherine Blackwood was my mother, and discovering that truth changed everything. Not because of the money or the status or the power, though those things have their place, but because it meant that someone had wanted me, had loved me, had tried to come back for me. It meant that my worth wasn't determined by the Whitmores' cruelty, but by Catherine's courage. It meant that every time they'd told me I was nothing, they'd been lying not just to me, but to themselves, because somewhere deep down, they'd always known exactly who I was. I keep all the letters now, Catherine's, Eleanor's, even Victoria's, in a special box in my office. Not cardboard and twine this time, but mahogany and silver, something worthy of their contents, Because even the cruel letters, the ones documenting the conspiracy to hide me, are part of my story. They're proof of what I survived, evidence of how far I've come. Sometimes young employees at Blackwood Industries ask me for advice. They want to know how to succeed, how to climb the corporate ladder, how to make their mark. I tell them about the box of letters. I tell them that sometimes the most valuable thing you can inherit isn't money or property or even opportunity. It's truth. And sometimes that truth comes in the most unexpected packages at the moment when you think you've lost everything. But what if the truth is terrible? One young woman asked me once. What if finding out who you really are is worse than not knowing? I thought about it for a moment, remembering the girl I'd been, sitting in that lawyer's office with a box of old letters while my sister took millions. The truth is never worse than a lie, I told her. Even if it hurts, even if it changes everything, even if it means accepting that the people who were supposed to love you didn't, the truth sets you free. And freedom, real freedom, is worth more than all the comfortable lies in the world. She nodded, but I could see she didn't quite believe me. That's okay. Some lessons you have to learn for yourself, through your own letters, your own revelations, your own journey from nobody to somebody. The conference room at Blackwood Industries has a wall of portraits now, all the CEOs throughout the company's history. My mother's portrait hangs there, painted from a photograph taken just months before her death. She's smiling, but there's something sad in her eyes, something that speaks of incompleteness, of unfinished business. My portrait hangs next to hers. In it, I'm holding a letter, not reading it, just holding it, like a talisman, like a key. The artist asked me why I wanted to be painted with a letter, and I told him it was because that's how I found myself, through words written by a mother I never knew, hidden in a box everyone thought was worthless. That's quite a story, he said. Yes, I agreed, it is. And it's mine. Finally, fully, completely mine. Not the story the Whitmores wrote for me, where I was the charity case, the obligation, the lesser daughter. Not even the story Catherine tried to write, where I would be hidden until the perfect moment that never came. But my story, where I was both nobody and somebody, where I was lost and found, where I discovered that sometimes the most precious inheritance comes in a cardboard box tied with twine. I still have the original box. It sits on a shelf in my home office, water-stained and worn, a reminder of where I started. My children ask about it sometimes, why I keep such an old, ugly box when I could afford anything I want. Because, I tell them, that box held the truth. And the truth, no matter how it's packaged, is the most valuable thing you can possess. They're too young to understand now, but someday they will. Someday, when they're faced with their own choices between comfortable lies and difficult truths, they'll remember the story of the box of letters. They'll remember that their mother was once nobody who became somebody, not because of what she inherited, but because of what she chose to do with the truth when she found it. The Blackwood Foundation, which I established last year, focuses on supporting adopted children and young adults who've aged out of the foster system. We provide scholarships, housing assistance, and something more: connection, community, the knowledge that they matter. Every recipient gets a letter from me, not email, but an actual letter, telling them that their worth isn't determined by where they came from, but by where they're going. Some of them write back, sharing their own stories of rejection and resilience. I read every letter, respond to everyone. Because I remember what it was like to feel invisible, to believe that nobody cared enough to really see you. And because I know that sometimes a single letter can change everything. There's a quote from Catherine's final letter that I've had engraved on a plaque in the Blackwood Industries lobby. The truth, my darling, is more powerful than all their lies combined. Every employee sees it when they walk in. Every visitor, every client, every person who enters our building is reminded that truth matters, that lies have consequences, that authenticity is the foundation of everything we build. Victoria's husband Richard tried to contact me last year. He's divorced now, working as a middle manager at a small firm, his glory days long behind him. He wanted to apologize, he said, for not seeing what was happening, for benefiting from the fraud without questioning it. I met him for coffee, just once, in a small cafe where nobody knew either of us. I should have known, he said, staring into his cup. The way they treated you, the money that seemed to come from nowhere, Eleanor's strange comments near the end. I should have asked questions. Yes, I agreed. You should have. He looked up at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen in all those family dinners. Respect. You could have destroyed me along with them, he said, but you didn't. Why? Because you were just another person fooled by the Whitmores, I said. And because revenge isn't the same as justice. Victoria and Eleanor committed crimes. You were just willfully blind. That's not illegal, just weak. He nodded, accepting the judgment. As he left, he turned back one more time. For what it's worth, he said, you're nothing like them. You're nothing like any of us. You're better. I wanted to tell him that being better isn't about breeding or bloodlines or even character. It's about choices. Every day I choose to be better than what was done to me. Every day I choose truth over lies, kindness over cruelty, authenticity over performance. The Whitmores taught me how not to be, and in that way, they gave me a gift they never intended. Last month, I went back to that lawyer's office where it all started. Mr. Harrison has retired, but the building is the same. I stood outside for a moment, remembering the girl who'd walked in with nothing but hope and walked out with a box of letters. If I could go back, would I change anything? Would I want to know sooner? Would I want to avoid all that pain? No, because that pain made me who I am. Those years of being nobody taught me to value being somebody. The lies taught me to cherish truth. The cruelty taught me kindness. The rejection taught me how to truly accept others. I am Emma Blackwood, not in spite of being Emma Whitmore, but because of it. The story could end here, with success and vindication, with the underdog becoming the top dog. But real life doesn't end neatly like stories do. It continues day after day, choice after choice. Every morning I wake up and choose who I want to be. Not the abandoned daughter or the hidden heiress or the corporate CEO, but just Emma, who found herself in a box of old letters and decided to build something beautiful from the truth. My daughter asked me recently if I ever think about what would have happened if Catherine hadn't died, if she'd come for me that Sunday as planned. I'd be a different person, I told her honestly. Maybe better, maybe worse, but definitely different. And while I wish I'd known my mother, I can't wish away the person I've become. Every experience, good and bad, led me here. To you, to this life, to this understanding of what really matters. What really matters? She asked, with the curiosity of a child who wants to understand the world. Truth, I said. Love, family, the real kind, not just the blood kind. The courage to be yourself even when the world tells you you're not. Enough. And the wisdom to know that sometimes the most valuable things come in the most unexpected packages. She thought about that, then asked, like the box of letters? Exactly like the box of letters. The sun sets over New York as I write this, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. From my office, I can see the city stretching out endlessly, full of stories and secrets and people trying to find their place in the world. Somewhere out there is another girl who thinks she's nobody, who's been told she doesn't matter, who's accepting scraps and calling them enough. I hope she finds her letters. I hope she discovers her truth. I hope she learns what I learned. That worth isn't something others give you or take away. It's something you carry inside yourself, constant and unchanging, no matter what lies people tell you or what lies you tell yourself. The Whitmores tried to bury me beneath their lies. They didn't realize they were planting seeds. Seeds of resilience, of determination, of truth that would eventually grow too large to be contained. They gave me a box of letters thinking it was worthless. They didn't know they were giving me everything, because in that box was proof that I was loved. Proof that I mattered, proof that every cruel word and cold shoulder and calculated dismissal had been based on a lie so large it required constant maintenance to sustain. The truth, as Grandmother Rose said, always finds a way. Sometimes it takes 23 years. Sometimes it comes in a cardboard box. Sometimes it arrives just when you think you've lost everything, to show you that you've actually had everything all along. I am Emma Blackwood, daughter of Catherine Blackwood, heir to an empire built on ambition and innovation. But I am also Emma, the girl who shelved books and made coffee, who sat in the corner chair at family dinners, who believed she was nobody until a box of letters told her otherwise. Both of these identities are true. Both of them matter. Both of them make me who I am. The letters are quiet now, sitting in their mahogany box, their secrets all revealed. But their impact continues, rippling out in waves that touch lives I'll never know about. Every scholarship recipient who gets a chance at education, every foster kid who finds stable housing, every young person who reads their story and thinks, if she could survive that, I can survive this. They're all part of the legacy of those letters. Catherine wrote in her final letter that she wanted me to be brave, brilliant, and everything they told me I couldn't be. I've tried to honor that wish, but more than that, I've tried to be something she might not have expected. Grateful. Grateful for the journey, even the painful parts. Grateful for the truth, even though it hurt. Grateful for the chance to transform from nobody to somebody on my own terms. The Whitmore house sold last month. The new owners are a young family, full of hope and plans. They don't know the history of the place, the secrets that were kept there, the lies that were told around that mahogany dinner table. And that's okay. Houses, like people, deserve second chances. Maybe this family will fill it with real love, real acceptance, real belonging. Maybe children will grow up there knowing they matter, knowing they're valued, knowing they're enough exactly as they are. Victoria's letter sits on my desk, unanswered for now. Maybe I'll write back again someday. Maybe forgiveness will come with time. Or maybe some wounds are meant to stay open, reminders of what we've survived and how far we've come. I don't know yet. That's another truth I've learned. You don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes it's enough to have the questions, to sit with uncertainty, to let time reveal what needs to be revealed. My son asked me yesterday what he should be when he grows up. Such a simple question, but it carried the weight of everything I'd been through. The pressure to be somebody, to matter, to prove your worth through achievement and accumulation. Be yourself, I told him. Be kind, be truthful. Be brave enough to open the boxes that scare you, because that's where the treasures are hidden. He laughed, thinking I was being mysterious. But I was being as honest as I could be, because that's what those letters taught me, that the truth, however it comes to you, is always a treasure. Even when it dismantles everything you thought you knew. Even when it reveals that the people who should have loved you didn't. Even when it shows you that you've been living someone else's lie. The truth sets you free. Free to be who you really are. Free to claim your real inheritance, not just money or property, but identity, dignity, self-worth. Free to write your own story instead of living the one others wrote for you. I was given a box of old letters while my sister got millions. She thought she'd won. The lawyer thought I'd lost. Everyone at that will reading thought they were witnessing the final insult in a lifetime of insults, the last rejection in a pattern of rejections. They were all wrong. I got the only thing that mattered. I got the truth. And the truth, as my mother wrote, is more powerful than all their lies combined. Ender. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen, please like how this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below and tell me, what was the moment in the story that resonated with you the most? And if you want more powerful stories about finding your strength and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.